Yeah, I hope you guys don't mind. We tend to record the conventions for other people. So I'm just going to, do you want me to share the screen for the agenda?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing here.
Oh, that's okay. I can just share and I'll bump you off. So anybody wants to read the welcome and honoring the land?
Would you mind doing it? It's kind of
Yes.
You need like a magnifying glass to read this version.
Sure. So I just want to welcome everyone and the participants at this convention of the Pacific Green Party. We recognize and honor the indigenous peoples of this region and their ancestral lands we now stand on, and also the wisdom of the indigenous peoples and the people who came before us. Indigenous peoples who occupy this land include the Willamette, Tumwater, Clackamas, Tlatlamet, Molala, Multnomah, and Walala Chinook peoples, and the Tualatin Kalapuya, who today are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Round, and many other Native communities who made their homes along the Columbia River. We also want to recognize that Oregon today is a community of many diverse Native peoples who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, and future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. We also thank the ancestors' spirit or compassion to guide our thoughts and intentions during this meeting.
Thank you. I think that's important to acknowledge.
Anybody wants to, so do you want to explain a little bit how we function in the
well, as far as like consensus and whatnot?
Consensus, and if you want to speak, raise your, because it's a small meeting, we can use the reaction button at the bottom. Just raise your hands. Everybody's muted, so raise your hands and we will unmute people as they want to speak.
Yes. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking so we don't have any background noise. Yes, this one will be fairly easy. Yes, and as far as like taking turns to speak, what we call stack, to get in line for that, please just make a note in the chat. All right, let's look at the rules for today. So I'll do my best to facilitate. We'll do that. Now, Nathalie's gonna keep track of time and take notes for us. So thank you for doing that. Stack keeper. I could do that, or would anyone like to volunteer to sort of keep track of who's next?
You might want to do that because Connor doesn't have, neither Connor nor Bob have, or Amy, I think, have reliable internet.
Sometimes. Mine is so.
I'll do my best to keep track of the stack, so you can put myself in there.
Thank you.
Another you put your mention through the chat, but I think we can use the in your Zoom window at the bottom or at the top, you should have something called reactions. And if you turn it on, it would allow you to raise your hand and to lower your hand. So like this, we can see who wants to speak or not. And Justin is going to keep track of in the order where people raise their hands.
Yes, that's great. Okay. Either will work. I'll kind of keep an eye on both. And then just remember to lower your hand when you're done. Okay, so next we have to review the moderation of OPA voting rules. All right, so Nathalie, could you maybe just tell us what we're going to be voting on today before we get into that?
We only have, just going to show you we use OPA Vote, which is an electronic system to do votes. And we're only voting on two candidates, candidate nomination. One is David Delk, who should be coming in around 10:30, and Rick Gray, who is here joining us right now, and we'll do his nomination after David. Those are the two things that we need to talk about. The other thing that we need to finalize is the date for the convention in January, so that we can start organizing that. And in 2023, the races take place very early in the year. There's a lot of school board, and I think those races are in May. So we need to start, the recruitment and campaigning early on.
Yeah, I think in previous discussions, we had thrown out the idea of possibly the second Saturday in January for that date. Do we want to just go ahead and settle that agenda item right now?
Yeah, I'm going to stop my share and look at the dates. I didn't remember
So in January of this year, we held our winter convention on the second Saturday of January. So we could be consistent and do the same in 2023. That would make it January 14th. The first Saturday obviously would be the 7th. I'm just thinking on the heels of all the holidays and the new year, to give ourselves time to plan for the winter convention, to make sure everything is ready to go. We may need that extra week. So I'm suggesting the 14th. How does that sound to everybody?
It sounds good to me. Remember that that's Martin Luther King weekend usually.
Fine with me. If it's a long weekend, people have a little more time to do what they need to do.
Yeah. I mean, for right or wrong, it's not a holiday that's necessarily universally recognized as a day off for folks, but
would you like to do it on the 21st, the third Monday in January? The only reason I'm concerned is it's not only for the participation, but for sensitivity for people who might have other events. Especially if you want to attract a diversity of people, some people might never be available on the second Saturday because they're participating in the NAACP or in, Mosaic event, or any African American Martin Luther King related event.
Did you say Monday?
No, Saturday.
Okay.
The third Saturday of the month of January instead of the second. Justin?
I'm fine either way. I mean, you mentioned you wanted to get things going early, but if you think there's going to be conflict in events that would prohibit people from attending the convention, I understand that concern.
Yeah, and especially if we want to have African American participate in our convention, it just might not be sensitive to their organizing needs.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not like we're doing it on Martin Luther King Day, but I understand what you're saying. 21st?
Yep.
Okay, it's fine with me, unless anyone has any objections or thoughts on the matter.
I don't know of anything significant happening that weekend, so sure.
This is we're basically waiting for David Delk to come on board and for anybody else to join the convention. So we're actually talking about the last items in the convention, which include determining the dates of the next conventions. And so the January convention is usually a business meeting where we elect steering committee members, national delegates, work on internal decision-making. And then we usually have another convention, which is more like a nominating, which is more like a nominating electoral convention. So, there is also the possibility of doing 2 days in January or doing, so there, at every convention, we decide on the next 2 dates. So the first one for sure date, and then the following, like a tentative date. And usually the races from what I remember, the races for school board and so on are in May. Any suggestions as to like a second, like when we should have like nomination or candidate centered convention after the business convention?
I'm sorry, so are you suggesting we have another one in between January and May?
I'm floating the idea.
Yeah,
We could also do, January, Saturday, making it like the business meeting, and Sunday like a campaigns, and have like 2 sets of people or two meetings basically in January on that 21st. That's a possibility, but it may be just too draining for some of us. So we could have another like major meeting, like for example, at the end of February or early March. Felipe and Rick, if you have any, Suzia, if you have any feedback, feel free to.
I was thinking perhaps quarterly, but that would mean like not till early April. And maybe that's not enough time ahead of the May, like school board stuff, if we want to be able to plan for that. And we're having the winter one in fairly late in January, in the 21st. So February would be, I don't know, perhaps too soon.
Should we do it like March 15, tentative?
Like before spring break hits.
Yes. And March 23 is March 11 and March 18. St. Patrick's Day is Saturday, 17. March 11?
And this is anything we have to, we need is somewhat tentative, so we're not beholden to it. We could just throw, a tentative date in there of, what are you suggesting? March
11 or March 18?
Let's do the 18th.
Okay.
We can always change it between now and then. At our January convention, we'll finalize something.
Yeah, we can always adjust. Okay.
All right, so maybe we should get back to the whole OPA thing. So if you're here and you've registered, you'll get a ballot. We need you to register just so we have an email address to send the ballot to. And I believe everyone's already been accredited, their voting status has already been verified. So I don't foresee any issues there. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to give folks until when to submit that ballot, Natalie?
So I'm thinking, we're going to have 2 nominations, give enough time for people to present, question and answer, discuss, and for us to review, make sure that everybody's on the ballots, and I was thinking about sending it around 11:30. It's going to be a relatively small convention, so I don't anticipate any problems.
Since David's not here, why don't we go ahead and hear from Rick first?
So David was going to come at 10:30 in 10 minutes.
What else should we do?
You can go and get a cup of coffee.
It's a great
I-
idea. I'm
I-
gonna go grab some water.
I need to get out and petition before it gets so hot that people hide indoors.
Okay, I'll send
Yeah.
there is on the slideshow on the agenda, there is a link with Gary's answers to the questionnaire and an article about him. I just would hate to have him interrupt, when David Dell comes in. I can ask David if he's ready to come on.
Yes, please. Let's try and get the ball rolling here.
Yeah, so we can make sure to meet your needs then.
Thank you.
I will say that I am perfectly willing to be interrupted if it would make it easier for you.
Sure.
Well, let's just try to stick to the agenda. I mean, maybe we should have asked David to be here from the get-go, but what is done is done. We just have a few minutes here. Dan, how's the campaign going?
I'll be turning in my sheets on Monday. I'm nearly done. I'll probably finish today at the Saturday market.
Oh, so there's not like a rush.
No,
Great.
How many signatures do you need, Dan?
well, I have in Oregon for a statewide, you need 500 valid active voter signatures. I have 587,
Good
and
for
you can
you.
never be entirely sure. So I'm going to go up there with more than 600.
I have been through it.
When I get to Salem, I'll gather a couple dozen more on the grounds of the Capitol itself, because there's always government employees walking around there.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated.
Oh yeah, well, as you can
Gotta-
guess, I've been out there a lot, so I'm well acclimated by now.
Got a few more days of this still.
Oh yeah,
Always
Love
best
it.
to have
You gotta-
more signatures than required, because we know they love to come up with reasons to throw them out. So
Oh yeah.
Dan, how can I sign your petition?
Go to my website. It's on the menu there. Although I'm collecting everyone's sheets right now, so it's probably a bit late to try to get one to me.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone's circulating it in Portland, or where do you live, actually?
Portland.
Yeah. I know Chuck Fall has some sheets, but he's on vacation in Ashland. Thank you.
Okay.
But the petitioning is just about done, so I'll try and come
Okay.
up with something else. Yep. Well, advertising's next, but the petition has taken most of my effort lately.
I was kind of hoping Mike would be here. Mike.
So sorry, I'm so sorry, Felipe. I clicked the wrong button and my mouse was on your mouth. Would you mind unmuting? I think some people might enjoy meeting you.
I'm good. I just was saying thank you to Dan and good luck.
Oh, thank you. I'll try and come up with some other volunteer opportunity after the petition. I'm sure there'll be plenty, but it's been my focus for the past month and a half.
Okay, give me just a
And by the way, I'm going to stop petitioning completely as soon as I'm done, because there's a backlog of other things. So the party petition, I'm not going to be circulating once it's ready. Is it ready yet?
We've had difficulties with the Secretary of State. The official, designated filer was not specified for some reason. So we've we've been dealing with that with this week. I understand that Seth did file to get that petition.
Okay, well, they usually approve them pretty quick,
Yeah,
but it's going to be a bit of a rush to get it done by the 16th.
I know. Sorry, I just cannot talk while I'm okay, there. Okay, I sent sorry, I didn't know that you could see all my emails. While we wait for David, when David comes on, do you want to introduce yourself, Rick, and
Yeah,
take it
sure.
out?
If that's what would suit the group. Hello, my name is Rick Gray. I live in Cannon Beach. I'm running for the 32nd District House seat in the State House of Representatives, which is the counties of Clatsop and Tillamook and a little strip of Columbia running along the river as far as Clatskanie, as far as the bridge to Longview. So that's the new district. I am running as a non-affiliated candidate on purpose. I've been around politics my whole life, and I'm pretty much fed up with the two major parties. Also had some experience here in Oregon of how the political system works here, enough to teach me that it's really about the upper I-5 corridor, or the lower Willamette Valley. Basically, that's where all the power is, and the rest of the state doesn't get listened to very much. And it's a major concern of mine that we come up with ways to make other voices heard than just basically Portland and a little bit Salem and Eugene. I got involved in this campaign about, I guess, early February. And if you're a non-affiliated candidate, what you need first to do is to get signatures to get on the ballot, 396 for a House seat. It's amazing how long that takes. It really is. But it's an interesting process. I found that because climate is my main issue, I found the most interesting place to go was the recycling center here in Cannon Beach. Just people would come by, and obviously they're going to be interested at least a little bit in the planet. And I would take a pair of work gloves and my clipboard and go out there and help them unload and pick up their signatures. And that became kind of a regular thing for me. But it did take pretty close to 3 months to get the 473 signatures I eventually turned in order to get the 396 approved. Got that done on July the 12th. Now, statewide, there are 8 people running for positions that require signatures to get on as non-affiliated candidates. The one that everybody knows is Betsy Johnson. But I'm the only one of the 8 so far to have gotten on the ballot by that process.
Rick, I'm gonna interrupt you because David came on.
Good.
And
Good.
I know that David has a meeting that he needs to go to. So
That's fine. I'll mute off and listen.
well, you get to meet a person that's very involved in campaign finance reform and quite a lot of other political work in Oregon. So take it on, David.
So I am running against Earl Blumenauer for the U.S. representative in Congress in the 3rd District. My platform is primarily focused on no war for developing a peace budget by moving funds which are currently in the Department of Defense and in the war budget in general to more human needs. And so that's kind of a summary of what I'm running on. And then my voters pamphlet statement emphasizes that, and then has a whole list of other items that should either are or should be in front of Congress now that would actually help us move and use those funds that could be made available if we didn't fully fund excessively fund the military constantly. So I'm open for questions.
How do you see organizing your campaign?
I can't say that organizing my campaign is my strong point, unfortunately. I probably need help with doing that. The major thing that right now is getting my voters pamphlet statement into the voters pamphlet, which requires for a U.S. congressional candidate to do that without being charged $2,500. It requires 300 valid Oregon voter signatures from voters in District 3. So I have 34 signatures myself. I have a couple of volunteers who've probably gotten another 50 to 60. I did just talk with Greg, and I never remember his last name, who runs one of the voter signature gathering companies about actually gathering 300 signatures for me. So if he does that, he said he would, and if he combined with the ones that I get through my own efforts, I should have more than enough to actually get my voters pamphlet statement published in the voters pamphlet without paying $2,500. So which is we really need a campaign in Oregon to reduce those figures. Those are a major barrier for a broad-based democracy. If you can't get your voters pamphlet statement in the voters pamphlet without paying a large sum of money, how do you engage all the people out there in the process?
I have Amy on the stack. Amy, go ahead.
I guess while you folks were chatting, I got my question answered. I'm reading the Progressive Party's page right now. Thanks. Carry on.
Can you share what your question was? And
I was just hoping for an outline of the Progressive Party's stances on issues. So I guess I found it. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive outline of where we stand.
And you consider yourself in line with those stated issues?
I am the chair of the Oregon Progressive Party, so yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and my voters pamphlet statement also has about half of it devoted to other issues that we need to be considering in Congress in order to move this whole country into a progressive stance relative to the issues we face.
Yeah, I apologize for my late minute lack of knowledge. I
no,
assumed by mistake that both you and Rick were both independents. So I see I have a little catching up to do. Thanks.
Yeah. So I have gotten the co-nomination from the Independent Party, and I'm hoping to get today the co-nomination from the Pacific Green Party as well.
Justin, you're on the stack.
You need to unmute, Justin.
Sorry, guys. Doing a couple things at once. I'm familiar with Blumenauer up there in Portland somewhat, although I'm in Lane County Congressional District 4. Is there a Republican, I have a kind of couple two-parter here. One is there a Republican challenger in that race?
You know, I was looking for that the other day, and I should know that. I could not find that there is. I would be really surprised if there's not. I would really be surprised if he got more than a few percentages of the vote. So if you're concerned about me taking votes away against Blumenauer and thereby electing a Republican, highly unlikely.
That's actually not a concern of mine, but my second part of the question is related. What would your response be to someone who would say that you might be playing the spoiler role? And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay, yeah, so my major response is that Earl Blumenauer is very much loved in this district. The possibility of him losing is about nil. He has about close to $1 million in a campaign war chest. according to Open Secrets, that he could spend. And no one comes anywhere close to being there. When I ran against him before, and I think it was in 2016, I got 7% of the vote, in spite of not actually doing much in the way of campaigning other than having a strong voters pamphlet statement. But running against him also was the independent party candidate, whose name was David Walker, and he got 20% of the vote. And he did run a campaign, although I don't think it was very vigorous. But and the Republican got like barely gone on the charts. And so the possibility of jinxing Blumenauer's reelection, I am getting a Republican in. I just don't see that happen. My second response is that for anyone who raises that concern, you need to be a clear and strong advocate for ranked choice voting in all elections.
Yeah, no, I agree. That is something that we definitely need, is some voting reform, whether it's ranked choice or another thing, alternative to plurality voting. Okay, just the reason I ask is because, we are third parties, we are third parties for a reason, I believe, and that is that we see that the two-party system is failing us, and that there is a need for a progressive party or a green party. But in the past, I've seen candidates on the progressive ticket drop out and then endorse the Democrat. So I guess I want some assurances that you will not do that, because we are here to, build something outside of the duopoly, and not drop out the duopoly.
Yeah, absolutely. I will not drop out of the race. If I dropped out of the race, I certainly wouldn't give an endorsement to somebody else. But I won't drop out of the race.
Bob, you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask why he was a progressive instead of a green.
So I missed the last one. Why am I a progressive?
Why are you a progressive instead of a green?
Oh, mostly it's because I have been such a strong supporter for campaign finance reform in Oregon, and Dan Meek is a member of the Progressive Party, and I'm sure you all know that he has been the major driver for all of the initiatives that have been put on the ballot with regard to campaign finance reform and establishing limits. He also wrote the initiative many years ago now to turn PGE into a public utility, which I was very strongly in support of. So my biggest influence for joining the Progressive Party was Dan Meek, although he may not know that, but that's the major one. The other one is that I did years ago go to a Green Party convention. It was in person, and I thought that there was a tremendous amount of attacks on people. Yeah, I didn't see it as being a unifying force at all. Unfortunately, I don't know if that's still the case or not, because I haven't gone to a convention for a long time. But that was my impression. That was one of the things that drove me to the Progressive Party rather than to the Green Party. Otherwise, I see the two parties being very, very much in line with what we're doing. And so I'm glad to also note that we have tried to cooperate on candidates and on campaigns in the past. And I hope that will continue. But I do think that having more parties rather than fewer parties is the way to go.
Thanks for your response. Good response.
Thank you.
So, David, as you know, I'm running also for governor, and the way that I want to run the race here is for governor is focus on canvassing, particularly for Joanne Hardesty, and so doing the physical organizing through, actually doing something. And on the other hand, developing the social media structure and network within the party. So hopefully you and I can stay in touch so that I can get some of your information and help disseminate it as well and just raise visibility. If you could send me your your candidate statement, I can share it, and also the email address, the website address for your webpage. Once you get nominated, I can just send them to our channels.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. In fact, I thought I had already shared my platform or voters pamphlet statement, but maybe not.
Maybe I missed it.
But yeah, I'll certainly send it.
Yeah. And, just replying to your concerns, we did pass moderation guidelines and things like that. So that individual behavior has decreased in importance. John, John, go ahead. You have a question? Oh, wait, Dan is on the stack. So go ahead, Dan, and then John is on the stack.
Yeah, hello, David. As you know already, I'm also a staunch anti-war activist and running mainly on that platform. My one hesitation about voting to co-nominate you is that your party is competing with ours in a major statewide race, namely mine. When you campaign in your district, and you're going to get a lot of votes from having the independent co-nomination, I'm interested in what you're going to be saying about current events on that angle, and talking about in particular the Ukraine war. How are you going? How are you going to campaign on the topic of the Ukraine war? Because this is in my opinion the main war topic, and it's also kind of taboo, and it's dangerous to do in Oregon because the Democrats are still, as a party, very much in favor of continuing it. So that's my interest.
Yeah. So my take on the Ukraine situation is that it is a war which has been caused. I'm not sure "caused" is quite the right word, but we'll say "caused" for the time being. Caused by actions that the United States and NATO have taken with regard to developing NATO as an aggressive arm of American imperialism. So if you'll, and specifically about war funding, we passed that large separate appropriations for the Ukraine war, and that was primarily armament, supplying armament. But we could have instead been funding primarily humanitarian efforts and efforts to pressure Ukraine and Russia to get to the negotiating table. So instead of being the first response as a military response, our response to any war type conflict should always be getting to the negotiating table as quickly as you can. And my understanding of the situation is that Zelensky has avoided that as much as possible, and certainly the leaders in NATO and the United States have tried to avoid that as much as possible. So that's my major thing is, we need to think about what our responses can be that are not conflict enhancing and instead are conflict reducing. So negotiating and providing aid for humanitarian aid rather than armaments would be a primary part of my response.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the sort of campaign finance reform side. And I saw in my research, my new research, learning about the party, I saw that you were involved in redistricting and called for a different process there. And I just wondered if you had put together a redistricting map with a better design? And if so, which district would you be running in if we had a different process? Thanks.
Yeah, so as far as I know, no one has suggested what the districts themselves should look like. And so that's for a future discussion. And certainly no one in the Progressive Party has suggested that.
Oh, let me clarify. In this last round of redistricting, they provided mapping software that allowed citizens to make a try at designing the districts. And there were a lot submitted, and they were all public. I know the Republican Party had submitted its own version of the maps, which were not adopted. And I just wondered if the Progressives had done so, seeing that you were a champion for the nonpartisan citizens panel to decide the district boundaries rather than the legislature and the Supreme Court and the Secretary of State.
Yeah, and so that would still be position, but we did not take a stab at actually drawing boundaries. But to fill the quiet space here, I do think still that the efforts to actually create a non-legislative redistricting process based on citizen input is the way to go to draw these boundaries. And there was in fact, I think there still is a initiative proposal about that.
John, you want to talk a little bit about your idea of organizing around watersheds?
Sure, yeah, it seems to me with the climate crisis, we need to have more awareness of where we are, where we live. I've been very interested in calling a new constitutional convention to change the whole mechanism, but definitely having some kind of administrative boundaries based on watersheds, I think would align us more with the environment, the planet, give us, rather than a false sort of nationalism, have a pride in the place where we live and breathe the water and become the soil eventually. So I would like to see, and I just wrote to Senator Merkley, who's from Myrtle Creek, so he knows that where his water came from. He's one of the few folks who were aware of that. It was amazing to me in our little neighborhood here in Southeast Eugene, people didn't know that all the fertilizer they were putting on their lush lawns was washing down and affecting the city of Monroe's drinking water. We're in the Long Tom watershed. And I was just looking at the city of Monroe's violations of water quality already. By the time it gets there, there are a couple contaminants in the water. So I would like to see a more comprehensive, not just saying how we divide up the colonial land boundaries, but to return more to an indigenous, Hawaii, the nation of Hawaii, the kingdom of Hawaii. The lands were based, the tribes take their names after bodies of water, and they have an intimate relationship. And that's how stewardship has happened for thousands, tens of thousands of years. So that's my little spiel. Thanks for asking me, Natalie.
Yeah, so in my mind, it makes a lot of sense to have districts set up by watersheds. There is obviously, or I think it's obvious, a interest of people who live in a particular watershed to protect the watershed and to protect the sources of water. So it makes sense to do something like that. I'm not sure if you're suggesting that the congressional districts should be redefined on watershed boundaries or not, but that would certainly be one way of doing it.
Yeah, my particular ask for Senator Merkley was by the time we redistrict again 10 years down the line, well, 8 years down the line now, that we adopt those boundaries, that we set up to transition to that. We have plenty of time, 8 years, and then we move forward from there. And so what I was asking for was a pilot project with California, Oregon, Washington to do that. It would basically try to keep the state boundaries aligned with the closest watershed boundaries. So there wouldn't be as dramatic a change as if a whole basin were moved, out of the state. So the states would continue to exist as they were with minor adjustments, but its subdivisions of the state, the county level, those would all become watershed-based administrative boundaries too. So that's my ask, and I'm kind of working on that in the background.
Yeah, so it sounds like exciting. So I would support your efforts, and maybe we move forward on it.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Natalie.
Any other questions? Anybody else wants to ask questions to David? And then we can move on to Rick.
I would just point out that I will be at the Medicare birthday rally today at 12 noon in Szymanski Park. So if any of you are in Portland and you haven't signed my petition yet to get on the ballot or to get the voters pamphlets thing, I would love it if I could see you downtown and gather your signature. And that starts at noon.
Thanks, David. I appreciate all your responses. And I just want to interject that, I think we should explore like a left unity slate sort of situation, like I've seen in other states like California. But that would require us assurances that we're not going to back the major parties' candidates, that we need to sort of band together so that we can leverage our collective power and sort of, force Democrats to address our interests, which they largely fail at. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's okay if I stay on for a few minutes longer?
Absolutely. Stay as long as you like.
Okay, great. Yeah, I only have a few more minutes, but yeah.
Go ahead, Rick, if you want to start over and introduce yourself and where you're running, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of us know David already through work in the community, but you're relatively new to Oregon. On the call, we have someone who actually works a lot with rural communities, has a pretty interesting group, and joined the call. So.
Okay. Well, hello again. I'm Rick Gray. I'm running for the District 32 seat in the Oregon House of Representatives. I am on the ballot, and at this point, I'm the only non-affiliated candidate to be on the ballot for the legislature. I just checked that yesterday, and there are a few people who are still trying to get the signatures necessary to get on the ballot, but so far I'm the only one who's managed it. And I totally sympathize with Dan trying to get the signatures for the voter pamphlet. That's another thing I'm going to have to do, or spend, I think for my seat, it would be $750. So that makes the 200 signatures I need worth about $375 each. And I think I'd much rather collect signatures if I can manage it. I have been involved in practical politics on and off my entire life. I grew up in Virginia. My dad was a state legislator for 18 years, Democrat. I went to college and law school. And then when I got out of law school, I went to work with him and helped him with his legislative work a great deal. That I didn't get paid for that, but I was in the next office and he was my boss. So when he came into the office and said, would you mind putting aside whatever you're working on for a minute and help me with this bill? I would help him with that bill. I learned a good deal from doing that. After about 3 years, I came in and said, Dad, I know you're a Democrat and you've always been a Democrat. You always will be a Democrat, but I feel like I'd be better off as a Republican. Now, in those days, this was late 1970s, you could be a fairly progressive Republican. My idea of a Republican was Teddy Roosevelt, somebody who cared a great deal about the planet and cared a great deal about taking care of people, but was a, outspoken, tough kind of guy. And so he said, yeah, you do what you need to do. I switched parties. I campaigned for the moderate Republican who was running for governor of Virginia that year, John Dalton. And the next year, John Dalton named me Secretary of the Commonwealth, which is what Virginia calls Secretary of State. I served him for 3 years and a couple of months. And then in August of 1981, I was planning to go to the last of my 4 meetings of the National Association of Secretaries of State. I always enjoyed their meetings. They were great meetings. I met a lot of interesting people. One of the people I met actually was Joe Manchin's daddy, who was then Secretary of State of West Virginia, and a tougher guy you very seldom meet. He and the Secretary of State of Montana almost got in a fist fight at one of our conventions, which was very interesting. But anyway, I was getting ready to go to the convention, and then the air traffic controllers were on strike. And some of you may remember the PATCO strike. And the President, Reagan, started having members of the union locked up. And I was kind of horrified by that. It wasn't that long after the Soviets had crushed the Solidarity Union in Poland. And it seemed to me to be too similar for America to be following that example. So I asked my assistant to see if we could find a way to get there by rail. And it turned out that the quickest rail trip I could make to that conference was 28 hours away. I thought that was a little absurd. So I wrote them and said, as much as I regretted it, I would not be attending the convention this year because I couldn't see flying while members of the PATCO union were locked up for peaceful protest. And I went ahead and posted my letter to the chairman of the convention in the press room, and you could imagine what followed. There was a good deal of the Republicans who, my governor was Republican, I was Republican, and there was an outcry. A couple of days later, the governor informed me that it was time for me to go, and I left. That was the end of my active political career as far as holding office is concerned. But I have been involved in campaigns pretty much my whole life, on and off. I will get involved when I think there's a candidate worth supporting. A most recent campaign activity was for Elizabeth Warren in 2019 when she was running. And I was specifically involved in that campaign as the head of what we call the 36 County Project. When I originally went to meetings in Portland for Elizabeth, the first thing I remember hearing was, in Oregon, only 7 counties matter in Democratic politics. And I looked up, the numbers and the charts and graphs for elections, and I realized quickly, yeah, those 7 counties are the upper I-5 corridor, basically. But I said, there are 36 counties in the state, and we really should have a presence in all of them. And they said, well, it's not going to matter. I said, it might not matter as far as getting the nomination. It might not matter as far as getting elected. But if she does get elected president, she's going to be president of everybody. And I think we should at least ask everybody for their vote. So a few others joined me, and we started a project to find a chair in every county in Oregon. We wound up, by the time the Warren campaign kind of fell apart, we had 22 out of 36 counties. We had chairs in, and you know, people who knew what they were doing, people who knew their way around politics. We had chairs in Harney County, we had chairs in Coos, Hood River. I mean, we got around a lot, and it was an interesting thing to do. And that's what kind of began to get me thinking about Oregon politics in general, and the fact that this is a state that is essentially run by the urban corridor, and the rest of the state doesn't get heard. And I think that has caused any number of problems. And it's something that I'm serious about addressing. So my number one issue is absolutely climate. I think we need to get very aggressive on climate. I think we've been delaying for far too long. I've been studying the issue for many years in terms of the science. I am not an expert on climate, on specific climate solutions, but I listen well and I learn well, and I'm a quick study. My expertise actually would be in education, probably more than anything else. But I do feel like we need to be active on climate, and we need to be active on the kinds of political reforms that would allow our state to hear voices other than just voices of the big cities. I'll stop. Questions?
Yeah, I had a question and I'll take the stack. I had a question that you answered in an interesting way. We met, through the nomination for the Progressive Party, etc. I met the candidate, the Democratic candidate for your area, and he's a very nice guy, very, good politics. And I asked you, well, what about this guy? And you had a really interesting response. Would you mind sharing what you shared with me about how you saw and what you saw?
Yeah, I haven't met Logan personally. I have seen him speak on a Zoom meeting. I've seen him once at a panel discussion that the American Association of University Women held at Clatsop Community College. I wasn't invited to that because I wasn't yet on the ballot, and that was, they basically had primary candidates. Logan is, you have to understand that a lot of my perspective comes from the fact that I've been a teacher for a lot of years. He's a young man, and he's bright, and he's articulate, and I think he would be, I think he could turn into somebody very interesting in politics. But I also think that I've been around the Democratic Party my whole life. Sometimes I've been in it, sometimes I've been observing it from the outside. But the Democratic Party has a terrible tendency to attract young people who think they're going to change the party. And then when they get into it, the party changes them. The Democratic Party is very good at co-opting people. It has always been a top-down organization. Internally, it has never been democratic. It's always been kind of ruthless. And I just feel like, if a guy in his 20s goes to Salem and joins the Democratic caucus, he is going to be told what all young members of parties are told. Keep your mouth shut, stand in line, wait your turn. After a couple of terms, we'll get you a nice committee assignment, and then you'll start to make a difference. The problem with this state is that the Democrats run the state. And it's basically the Portland Democrats who run the state. And they don't want to hear from, well, I don't know if they don't want to hear, but they don't hear from anybody else. They don't know the rest of the state. They don't know the East. They don't know the South. They don't know the coast. And they don't know the problems there. And the solutions that they come up with for things are urban solutions, which often don't fit the rest of the state. And so what do we have? We have people, we have Republicans walking out of the legislature. And partly that's power politics, but partly it's because they literally don't feel heard. I don't think that the legislators themselves are not feeling heard, but they can say that to their voters. They can say, hey, we're not being heard, so we're walking out. And their voters believe that. What we need is to open up the processes of the state so that more voices are heard. And I have a specific suggestion for how to do that. It is a way of conducting elections for the state legislature that would open up the process more. I'll be happy to explain that if you'd like to hear it. But well, it's a little complex. It'll require a little focus.
We could circle back to that if we have time. And I apologize as far as the stat goes, everybody. I'm not sure which hands were raised in which
I
order,
saw
but
Amy, Dan, and John.
perfect. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was reading
Hi.
some of your, oh yes, good morning. Thanks for coming out. I was reading some of your campaign statements earlier, and the one that really jumped out at me was a comment about us trying to save Ukraine. And my back immediately went up because I was thinking about Republicans like Mark Hatfield and Senator Wayne Morse, who was first a Republican and then a Democrat, and both of them suffered quite a bit at various times for their unpopular stance against the Vietnam War. And I am very troubled by what we're doing in Ukraine. I'm very troubled by the amount of money we're basically, excuse my French, pissing away on the military. And I have a hard time squaring your comment about the Ukraine with your seeking the endorpment of an anti-war party. So I'd appreciate if you'd comment on that a little bit. Thanks.
Amy, I'll be frank with you. When I read the Green Party information that was up for candidates to look at before we asked for that, it seemed to me like this was a party that was primarily concerned with the environment, with saving the planet, and with political reforms that would open the process up to more people. And that is why I am seeking your support. I'm a practical person. I am not a progressive. I'm more of a progressive conservative. I'm a centrist, really. And by the way, progressive conservative is an old term that goes back to Disraeli. But I am not going to, I'll be frank with you. I would rather not have you vote for me if there's any illusion about this. I think that Ukraine is a problem that is caused by Putin's aggression. I don't think that it's America's fault that Putin decided to invade a country and bomb and kill children, families, schools, churches. You know, I don't think that we are, I don't think we can ignore this kind of thing. We ignored this kind of thing for too long back in the 30s. There are times when you just have to step up. I think we should.
All right. Well, one thing I'd suggest before I get out of the way for everybody else is I don't have the writing in front of me, but I would beg you to consider the amount of environmental damage, not to mention bad will, that the US military is causing at home and around the world, particularly right now in Hawaii, where there's been heavy contamination of water that's rendered so much water undrinkable.
I have no disagreement.
I appreciate your time.
No, I have no disagreement with you on that at all, Amy. I think that the military has been, I think that our military needs to be retrained basically to understand environmental issues, because in the next 100 years, where there are wars, there are going to be wars over water, over arable land, and so forth. And our military needs to understand what they're getting into and also how to help not create more damage. It troubles me that our Navy causes, that the vessels in our Navy cause so much harm to sea life. It troubles me the amount of sheer waste and burying of toxic things. The military does not do a good job with the environment, and they need to be retrained and reoriented to do that. But that's a different thing from allowing this war. You want to talk about environmental damage. They're destroying a whole country. The Russians are destroying a whole country. And if this had been ended sooner, it would have ended.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, Dan, yeah.
Hello, Rick Gray. First, I found you well-spoken in your presentation. That's always a plus in a candidate. I too am troubled, however, by your statements about Russia and Ukraine. Not only what Amy read, which I haven't, but what you said here today. And I'd like to follow up on that to ask, what is your, do you consider Russia to be an enemy of the United States, number one? And number two, if not, what would you say is the purpose of the NATO alliance?
Well, the NATO alliance has evolved over time, so I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think it's safe to say that if you look at Russian history going back to, I don't know, Peter the Great, Russia has tended to be aggressive within Eastern Europe and the northern parts of the Middle East and even South Asia. It is historically the case. If you've read anything on Putin, and I have taken a look at some of his background, he has always embraced a kind of historical memory of Russia as a great power and a conquering power. And it seems like his personal plan, his personal agenda is to reestablish something of the empire that used to be. But I've always suspected, with regard to Putin, that he's playing a little bit of a magician game with us, a little legerdemain. So much of what he does, including his support for Trump back in 2016, so much of the trouble that he seems to want to cause indirectly, I think is a distraction, because his main agenda, I think, is to continue selling oil and fossil gas and so forth to the world. I think that he, like any of the oil states, any of the oil industries, would love to see us distracted by other issues so that we continue not paying attention to the fact that the planet's on fire. And yeah, I think a lot of the trouble that he causes is particularly about that. But yeah, I'm sorry. Have I answered your question at all?
Well, why does NATO still exist? Basically?
Why does NATO still exist?
Who's the enemy if we have this big alliance? Because let me give a bit of background to this question. NATO has been quite aggressive for its own part over the past two decades. NATO led the invasion of Afghanistan, and we are still holding Afghanistan's its central bank's money after withdrawing, and a number of other countries that are not anywhere near Europe. NATO has since the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO has adopted this global focus. And then there's the agreement not to expand NATO towards Russia's borders. So do you not also view NATO as an aggressive alliance? And if not, why not?
I think NATO has been drawn into the role that the United Nations ought to play, but can't play because of the veto. Do I regard it as aggressive? No. I think that it would be difficult to assume, based on the history of Russia over the past several hundred years, that just because they stopped being the Soviet Union, they were suddenly going to adopt a peaceful policy toward the rest of the world. I think had they done so, had they become a democracy, had they adopted a peaceful approach to the world, NATO probably would have fallen apart. There would have been no particular need for it. But I think the people who live in Eastern Europe believe very strongly, and in Central Europe believe very strongly, that they need to have the alliance, because they don't trust a still big country with a lot of wealth, a lot of population, and nuclear weapons. They don't trust that that country is going to be peaceful and unaggressive. And so far, we haven't seen much evidence that they are.
John, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, Rick, thank you so much for coming today. This has been just such a great conversation, and I really enjoyed your biography as well. And I had two questions. You know, you said you worked for your father in the historic Virginia State House, and I wondered if you had that sense of history, like you were in George Mason's original office or something like that, and if you could talk a little about that. And then recently, within the last couple of days, Christine Whitman, Andrew Yang, a coalition of Democrats and Republicans have started the Forward Party, which would seem to be a natural for you, a natural fit. And with your work organizing all 36 counties, possibly the new state chairman of the Forward Party. And I wondered if you had given any thought to that. Thank you.
John, thank you. Those are two great questions. First of all, in Virginia, when George Mason was around, the state capital was in Williamsburg. And Williamsburg is about 60 miles from Richmond. So no, we didn't use those offices. Generally speaking, once every couple of years, the General Assembly will go down to Williamsburg for one day and meet in the old colonial capitol buildings down there. Because I don't know if you've been to Virginia, but Williamsburg was completely rebuilt along the lines of the original historic city. And it's an amazing place to go. You can go to blacksmith shop and see people working at blacksmithing. You can see all the different stores and shops around there are people in colonial costume doing colonial work. They have a tremendous program there on the history of African Americans in colonial Williamsburg, most of whom were enslaved. And a friend of mine actually heads that program. They do a tremendous amount of just real world education about what life was like in the 17th century. But the state capitol in Richmond is actually the Capitol building itself. You've all seen a million times because it often stands in for the U.S. Capitol or the White House or something like that in Hollywood movies. I've worked on Lincoln, on John Adams, on several other movies that were shot in and around the state capitol, standing in for the U.S. Capitol. But the buildings that the legislators work in are modern office buildings across the street from that. Okay, second question was Andrew Yang. I saw the announcement and I read it, and there was I think James Bowie, the columnist for the New York Times, wrote, I think the next day, "This will never work." And I had already come to the same conclusion myself. Third parties. I taught history for a lot of years. I've studied history since I was 18. When I went to the University of Virginia, my dean, for some reason, decided that this kid from a country high school should be stuck in a graduate seminar his first semester in college. So there I was in a seminar, U.S. history, 1789 to 1815, 26 years, 15 books. Most everybody but one other guy was a graduate student. And there I am scrambling to deal with this course, but I fell in love with it. And what I learned from history is this: it is difficult to have a third party in this country. There has only been one successful third party in this country, and it was founded in 1854. It was called originally the Fusion Party or the Anti-Nebraska Party, but very quickly adopted the name Republican Party. The Republicans were founded at a time when the two major parties, the Whigs and the Democrats, were gridlocked. It was a huge moral question that the country had to address, slavery, and it wasn't addressing that question. And there was a huge economic need to transform the economy from an economy that essentially exported products to Europe to be manufactured, and to turn our own economy into an industrial economy. To do that would have required basically an end to slavery, because slavery was entirely engaged in producing raw materials. So there was a moral issue and an economic issue that were closely connected, but they weren't getting addressed. In 1854, Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And without taking you all back to high school, Kansas-Nebraska Act eliminated the barrier to slavery that had been set up by the Missouri Compromise in 1820. It basically opened all the Western territories to slavery. And there were Democrats and Whigs who were so offended by that, horrified by that, that they quit their respective parties and embraced people whom they had been hating for decades. Democrats embraced Whigs. These were practical politicians, governors, senators, congressmen, political organizers, people who'd been playing politics for years in the real world. who embraced each other and started something new. And one of those people was Abraham Lincoln. In 1854, that started. By 1861, 7 years later, that new third party had Abraham Lincoln in the White House, had a majority in the House of Representatives, had a majority in the US Senate, which is the evidence that there is a way in this country to create a third party that works. But the thing that's interesting is it was created at the state and local level by practical politicians who actually understood how politics works. It was not created from the top down. It was not created to satisfy the ego of somebody who wants to run for president. It was created as a moral response to an outrage and as a determined effort to do something about that outrage. I think there is one issue, and absolutely only one issue in this time, that will justify the creation of a third party in terms of, you know, a third party that could actually win. I mean, I didn't get into this election not to win. I'm better qualified than either of my fellow candidates, and I could win this election. But this is not about me. I'm trying to blaze a trail. I'm 71. I'm not going to have a great, brilliant political career. I want to prove that it can be done so that younger people will start doing what needs to be done. The only issue that you could build a third party around that will actually work is climate. Because it's an emergency, because it's a crisis, and because it's an enormous moral issue. We need to leave a livable planet to our children and grandchildren. If we do that, if we make that the center of a party, and otherwise have a big tent. I'm fairly centrist on most issues. The issue that I am very progressive about is climate. And the reason I use the word progressive in quotes there is because I don't think climate is a left-right issue. I don't think it should be a left-right issue. Climate is a survival issue. We should all be in this game. So I think a third party would work, but I don't think that Yang knows anything about politics really. I mean, he's run for president, but he's a tech guy. He hasn't done years of campaigning. Things like that. Christine Whitman is different. She is somebody I respect a lot. I've always thought she was a really great person, but again, they're starting top down, and I don't think it works like that. It's got to be. It's not going to be entirely grassroots, but it's got to be coming together of people who have done politics, understand politics, and are willing to embrace each other and build something new that works and it's designed to win. So, short answer, I'm not at all interested in Yang's party.
Thank you very much.
Bob is next, Felipe Lora, and I'm going to put my hand up.
Yes, I'd like to ask how the candidate feels about the 2014 call between Victoria Nuland, the Assistant Secretary of State, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, where they were discussing who should replace the elected president of Ukraine after the coup. I'd like to know if you're aware of that, and if so, what you think of it.
I'm not.
How could you be ignorant of something that's so central to the conflict there? Something which clearly shows the U.S. was involved in the coup.
Well, if you, first of all, I wasn't really following Ukraine in 2014, but I would have heard of this if it were, I think I would have heard of this if it actually happened.
Well, this is an important topic to me, and your ignorance on it makes you've lost my vote.
I don't really mind if that's the case, sir. I have my positions.
Let's be respectful. I understand we have strong opinions on all of these matters. I think the Ukraine issue has been discussed enough. I don't think we really have agreement in that area with Rick. Rick, I have a history background too. I just don't see it in the same framework that you do. It doesn't remind me of the 30s so much as it reminds me of all the other proxy wars we fought over the years, but I'll just leave it at that. But let's maybe bring up some other issues if we could. Felipe was next, and then Carol.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mr. Gray for his intervention. I thought that questioning Mr. Gray will stop as soon as we learn about his position on Ukraine. So I think Mr. Gray came to the wrong party to ask for our support. And like you said, I just gonna leave it on that. The intervention of Mr. Gray is clearly telling me who I'm not supporting. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks.
Carol, you
Thanks.
have your hand up.
Carol? And if Carol had something, if not, we can go to Nathalie.
Carol, if you're trying to speak, you're muted.
I don't see her on the screen anymore.
She is, it's just, she's at the bottom left.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Send me a message through the chat if you're having difficulties with your microphone or something like that, Carol, okay? Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you very much for coming on, Rick. I think that there is some information that we could speak about of the meeting in terms of Ukraine, because I think that a lot of information is not necessarily going on to the main media channels, but I really wanted to thank you. I think that there's a lot of, in other areas, a lot of congruence of opinion, and I'm just really appreciative of the work that you're doing, trying to get people involved. And what you're talking about, politics being dominated by a small group in Oregon, that's very urban. I totally agree with you about that.
Thank you.
So Justin, Carol, I'm going to lower your hand. Just raise it again if you want to speak. And Justin, you were on the stack.
Thanks. Yeah, more of just like sort of a comment than a question. First of all, on the positive side, I really appreciate your comments about the environment and your concern for the environment, and also the military's impact on it, because there's something like, you know, one of the largest polluters, yes, in the world is our U.S. military. So yeah, even if we help the marine life and whatnot, we're still a huge polluter. So anyway, but besides that, the 36 county thing I thought was great. I think that's something as a Green Party we try to do, is we try to bridge that urban-rural divide and to sort of give voice, or at least provide an avenue for our progressive rural friends to give voice to their concerns. So I do think that's important, and I'm glad that you're sharing those ideas in your circles. And I appreciate you letting us learn more about your campaign. I just wanted to share a little bit about us with you, because there is this perception, and you made a comment earlier that your impression of us was that we were primarily concerned with the environment and like voting reforms, which is true. Those are things that we are concerned with, but that is not all that we are concerned with. So I just want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about us. In the slide show at the beginning of the thing, you may have seen that there was 4 pillars that we stand by, and that's democracy, the environment, social justice, and peace. So that's why the Ukraine thing is pretty big, and as an anti-war party, as a party of peace, this is one of the 4 pillars that we stand on. So we are more than just an environmental party. And I just wanted to make sure that folks understand that, because I think that's a misperception of us in a lot of ways. And I think these things have a lot of overlap too. I think, you know, the environment and peace, as we just discussed, with the military being a polluter, there's overlap there, right? There's overlap with social justice and with our grassroots democracy. So, you know, we're not like the Ford Party. We're not a top-down Yang sort of ego-driven venture.
Yeah.
We do try to.
I can tell. I mean, I can tell just from having met some of you that yeah, this isn't about ego. This is
sure. I mean, all of us are here just are volunteers that just want to make this a better country. So,
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we're largely grassroots, and so the success of our party depends on people's involvement in the party. Yeah. So we're only as good as the people that are with us. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you just so that you could kind of better understand where we're coming from and why we're all here. Those are sort of like the values that bind us together.
Well, Justin, I appreciate that. It does not feel like a match to me, your party and me. And maybe that the best thing I could do from you would just be to withdraw my application. And that way you wouldn't have to go through the trouble of either being divided or turning me down.
If that's the route you want to go, I mean, I respect that.
I think I will. I mean, I'm pretty firm in my opinions. I haven't come by them lately, and I have not noticed that being in favor of peace is the way that peace happens. I prefer peace myself.
I think we're a very realistic party, and I think we understand that the Ukraine thing is a very complex thing, and that NATO did play a role, and the United States did play a role. It's not to say that Putin's a good guy, but it's to say that the situation is complex, and it's not just an unprovoked aggression by Putin, right? I mean, like we didn't tolerate in the Bay of Pigs nukes being in Cuba, right?
No.
We saw that as a form of aggression, right? Proximity of nuclear weapons to our border, we did not tolerate that. So to expect the Russians, right or wrong, to tolerate such a thing is just it's a bit naive, I think. And also, like, there are experts in the field of foreign policy, from this realism school of foreign policy that have been warning us about this. Mearsheimer, for example, who's conservative in some ways, but has recognized the role that NATO has played in sort of escalating this, right? And what it's turned into, in my opinion, is just another way to fund the military and industrial complex. We're sending billions of dollars. So, I mean, yes, I don't think we would support sending you to Congress if you're going to vote for those things.
Well, I'm not running for Congress, so that wouldn't be an issue.
I'm sorry, but regardless.
I don't think Oregon is going to declare war on anybody.
True.
Okay. Well, let me leave you with this. If you have 5 minutes or 3 minutes, I'll leave you with this. Because I will say that clearly this is not a good match. I wish that it were. It would be nice to have you on my second line, but I don't think that's realistic. One thing that I am running on that I have not heard anybody in this state or any other state talk about, but I think it would be very helpful, is if we would adopt for the election of our state legislature a system of parallel voting. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but if you look it up, it's the system used in Germany and a lot of other countries. And essentially what I would propose, at least in Oregon, is this. We have 30 senators and 60 representatives. What I would propose is that 30 of the representatives be elected from the exact same districts as the senators. So you have 30 members elected from single member districts. I would include a little piece of ranked choice in that, but still 30 members from individual districts. And then the other 30 would be from 3 big regions. Basically, probably it would be Portland, the East and South, and the coastal area. And each of those regions would elect its members by proportional representation. If you think about what that would signify, it would probably mean that from the East, you would get, in any of the districts, in any of the big regions, you would have a chance, if you got 10% of the vote, to elect one member of a smaller party. So that would be something. But also in the East, you'd probably get a couple of Democrats. In Portland, you'd probably get a couple of Republicans. And I think it would be interesting to have a situation where the eastern part of the state was represented. We had a couple of Democrats representing it. People in the East could feel like, wow, you know, yeah, there are a couple of people there who are from my party who speak for me. And that in the, if you had a couple of Republicans from Portland, you'd have people in the Republican caucus saying, look, you know, before we walk out completely, understand the people in our area and how they feel about this. And you might get more actual conversation if we didn't have absolute solid blocks of Democrats from Portland, absolute solid blocks of Republicans from the East, but had a little bit more of a mix of people from different parties from different regions, and the opportunity at least for third-party candidates to get elected. So I will be talking about that in my campaign, but obviously it's not going to happen unless people around the state get behind it. So I hope you'll consider that as a possibility.
Sure, some of our members are very involved in pushing for alternative voting systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that it's not some bright idea that I had. It's been used. I first saw it when I was in Germany in 1980, and you basically get a ballot that says you get one from column A and one from column B. So you vote for the individual candidate for your district in column A, and then you vote for the party in column B, and that your vote is counted in with all the other votes to allocate the seats for that region. So it's a constructive way to add greater diversity of perspectives in a legislative body. And it's one of my top issues because I think it would help.
Great.
I appreciate your time, folks. Thank you for meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Greg. So I'll get back to you with the results of the vote.
You don't need to. You can withdraw me from your consideration. I wouldn't want to be that divisive to a group that's trying to get something done.
You know, I think that discussion and cross education is always important.
Oh, that's true. But I'm saying, you would have trouble with your members if you endorse me, and you might if you didn't. So let's not go there.
Oh, don't worry, we've got it.
Thank
you very much again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Best of luck, Greg.
Thank you. Where do I go to get out? Leave. There we go.
Well, always good to hear from someone else. I think we're just left with Green Party members at this point. Dan, did you have something? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that a few of the people on this call, all being party members and well established, if they're willing, volunteer to just put their names on for state senator, state house in their district, just so that we're there. You don't really have to campaign or do anything, but kind of like what Daniel Hoffé did in 2020. He hardly campaigned at all, but he managed 3% of the vote just by being there. That's all, just a suggestion so we increase our presence.
Yeah, I agree. It just gets our name on the pamphlet.
Well,
Yeah, I personally feel like that wouldn't, well, it's not something I would do, although I appreciate Dan's point, because from the standpoint of a Green voter, I would want somebody who would actually be serious about campaigning, even though we know there's a lot of obstacles to them being seen and heard. But thank you anyway, Dan.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the voters do deserve that. But if we can't give them that, we can at least give them something. I think our one of our biggest positives is that we offer the voters a choice, and it's that choice is the important thing. But anyhow, I'll shut up about it now.
No, I kind of see both points. Yes, I mean, if we were close to winning, then yeah, I would definitely want. I mean, but frankly, we're trying to build something still. This is still in building mode. So in that regard, I kind of I'm with Dan on that, the purpose for us is not to provide a candidate necessarily that's serious, because we seriously don't have a realistic chance where 3% vote would be great, right? But what we can do, a candidate should provide voters with the choice, and there is something to said about trying to build something and having a presence on the ballot, right? Because that's like a criticism of the Green Party. It's like, what do you do in between general elections, right? I hear this all the time, you know. It's like, well, this is something that someone who doesn't organize clearly says, because if you were organizing, you would know what we do in between general elections.
But we are endorsing we do have 3 candidates, and it looks like we might be endorsing a 4th, so that's not bad.
No, I would support endorsing David based on his statements today.
Bob is on the stack.
Go ahead, Bob.
You're muted.
Thank you. I just want to say something that's not rude, I hope, which is I think that someone running for obligation has running for office has an obligation to actually run for the office, you know, not just put your name in. I think there's an expectation when you put your name in that you're actually a candidate, not just a placeholder. That's all I have to say on that.
Well, I respectfully disagree, because I mean, you're just 3%, Bob. I mean, 3%. If we were like 30+% or 40%, or, you know, even 25%, might be a different story. But when you're trying to build a party, you can't just not be present. You know what I mean? So there is something to be said for the value of just being present on the ballot, or else people just forget about you.
So on the stack, I have myself and Dan. And I think I'm going to close the stack so we can send the votes and vote. I'm going to adjust the OPA vote in a second to remove Rick, since he's withdrawn. But I wanted to mention, in terms of running for office, it depends on what you define as winning. Winning is not only just getting elected, but also shifting the discourse and putting the word out, being invited to a couple of debates and planting the seed, reaching out. And the best way to organize is to run campaigns. Just having a website and putting a few social media messages out, even just a few statements out. It doesn't need to be very big, aggressive campaign, but even just a very minimum does get the word out and gets people to think about it and to educate. So I would encourage people to run, just to run, to put the statement up, and something is going to happen. Even if you don't do a lot of organizing, some of the word gets out, and it also allows the party to use that race to get the word out about issues in that district. It's just a really good platform. So it depends on what you mean by running an aggressive or a strong campaign. We do what we can, but it's the best way to organize is to run for office. I have on the stack Dan. Oh, no, I have Dan. Was he on the stack?
Not recently.
Okay. John, you're on the stack. And then and then I have Justin. And no, okay.
I thought we were wrapping up and ending the meeting. So I wanted to put in a request. I thought there was some really good quotes from the candidate that we may be endorsing. And I would like to get the recording of this meeting and use the portions with the 2 candidates who spoke and use those for stories. I won't use any of the discussion among the Greens. So just wanted to get that request in before we part.
Totally. I'll send you the link. I'll upload it somewhere and send you the link.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for doing that.
Okay, so we basically have the dates for the election, for the next convention. It's going to be January 21st, and then a tentative March 11. That's what we talked about, March 11. Hold
I
on.
had the 18th written down, but it's not super important. We can have.
Yeah, March 18. No, it's for the minutes. I get
Oh,
distracted. Okay.
but yeah, we'll finalize that on the 21st of January.
And we may also want to, I don't know what the COVID situation is, but we may want to consider doing an in-person convention. That would be something also that I think that eventually we may want to do a dual meetings because of that possibility of meeting.
I'd love to get back into that, but that's going to require even more planning, obviously, right? Because we tried it that one time before, like in SIO, and it was kind of wonky or whatever. So it would require a considerable planning to make sure it goes off smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I'm just going to close the meeting and update OPA vote and send information. Okay.
Should we make sure that we all get ballots first? Is it everyone that?
Okay, so give me just a second. I'm doing this here.
Would anyone like to comment on David?
I have a positive impression of what he said, and I've been reading the Progressive website. Should have done that sooner. It seems very good. I appreciate that they want to work with us.
I appreciate that he committed to staying in the race and not, dropping out. That's my concern is, that they end, I want us to build something together and not ultimately cave and back Blumenauer against the Republican. So that was the assurance that I was looking for. I'm glad that I got it.
I have to add your email for the OPA vote. Is your email Amy? Is your email through Rise Up still?
Unfortunately, yes, it's still the right one. Hopefully by the time we have our meeting in March, I'll have something better.
Okay. Is Felipe gone?
He's here, I think.
Hi, Felipe. You wanna introduce yourself a little bit because
yeah,
if you want to.
Sure. First, I'm Felipe Lora. I'm from Dominican Republic. Came to United States a long time ago. Moved to Oregon. I love it. Was a teacher in high school. Retired, I would say, at the beginning of the pandemic. And now I have time and I'm involved in politics in Dominican Republic. And thank you for bringing the Cuban example to Mr. Gray. I decided to use my time also get involved in United States politics, which affect me because I'm living here in Portland, Oregon. And I just decided to start with checking out the Green Party, which I'm already a registered Green Party member. And I'm kind of listening and learning the system to see when I can say something and do my input that definitely seem to me that I'm going to have soon. I'm here to help. And by the way, if any of you end up on the ballot, it doesn't matter. If you are in the Green Party, my job is to talk about you with my circle. Use me, please. Thanks.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do, Felipe, is maybe you and I should meet. By the way, Bob and Connor are very involved in the media communications committee, and maybe you should join one of the meetings. So because there is a lot of information from the national and from various different sources that would be very good to move into the Green Party social media. And I just need to plug you into the different sources. Basically, we haven't had anybody focused on that aspect of our communications, so it would be great to do.
Yeah, can I add that as a member of the Communist Party in Dominican Republic, and kind of running a little bit of media propaganda group, and we have our way to do things. And I was talking to Nathalie, and I think that maybe some of our expertise can be used to put the word out, or whatever happened on the party. I saw Carol here, and Carol is very active on Facebook, which is people 40 and up, kind of like that's their media. I would love to get in touch with Carol, but it seemed like she left already.
What's your?
Yes, go ahead.
What's your name on Facebook?
It's Felipe Lora.
I know. I looked it up there. There's a lot of Felipe Loras.
Okay.
Can you send me a friend request? I'm just Dan Puliu.
Okay.
The biggest help I'm looking for on social media right now is just to get followers for my campaign page.
Yes.
Which is Dan Puliu for U.S. Senate, Oregon. And it's really easy. If you just go to the top of that page, you can invite all your friends to follow a page, and pages can build up a following quickly that way.
You might want to look at the positions that Dan advances, because there's not always congruence with our positions.
Natalie, it's not necessary.
I just FYI.
Of course, researching is very important. So before I say I like. First, I don't take friends just because they friend me. I research them before and all that, and I suggest that you guys do the same if you are not doing that already. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I think I may not
invite as well if you have the chance. I was trying to find you by city also, but it didn't help me. Felipe.
Okay. So I don't know what's the best way to put my info there, but I'm gonna have to research you to find you. But if you see Felipe Lora, maybe be two. I have one for family and other for politics. See my face on this here is the same. I'm not hiding from anything. So let's start building up the media, or the propaganda media. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks, guys.
No, thank you. And yes, Carol would be a great person to connect with. She's very involved, and she does a good job of moderating that one group. So
it's true.
You guys might be able to team up.
Yeah, thanks.
I think I was not able to delete I didn't do that. I thought I took it out, but Rick Gray's still there, but he withdrew.
Bob had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that while the Ukraine war, support for the Ukraine war there is pretty much a deal breaker for me, somebody's opinion on whether people should have mandatory vaccinations is not. So just a side note.
Yeah, I mean, I think our tent's a good size. It's not as big as the Democrats, which is good, I think, in my opinion. There is room for disagreement, though, I think, within our platform.
Yeah, if the Democratic tent gets any bigger at this point, it's not even going to be a tent anymore. It's going to be more like a stadium full of Republicans.
You should have gotten your ballots, and again, you can vote none of the above for Rick. He withdrew his nomination.
I got my link.
look up the weather, see what the temperature is yet.
Okay, I'm all set.
I mean,
got-
the good news
I
is
got
the
mine.
temperature won't peak until like 5 or 6 p.m. The bad news is it's already really hot.
Oh, Weather Underground says triple digits now. Yep. That's going to be fun.
Eh.
Hey, Natalie, I'm looking at my vote here and there's only 2 candidates on it. So it looks like you were successful.
Yeah, but I think that, well, you'll see you can still vote for Rick, but he withdrew. So I should have actually deleted that election, but whatever. Just,
Oh, wait a sec. So there's only one person to vote for? No, I'm only seeing, if I eliminate Rick Ray, I'm only seeing David Dilk.
that's right.
Oh, okay.
None of the above for the Rick thing, and then David or none of the above for the David one. Yeah, Dan, my phone's telling me 86 now, but it'll be 95 by 2 o'clock. It's saying it might get up to 104.
Wow. Probably
102,
will.
102
Probably
by
will
6.
if you're on the pavement.
Brutal.
I'm not even looking. I'm just staring by this window all day because it's the coolest window in the house. Making sure the cat has ice cubes in his bowl. That and this meeting were my big plans for today.
Did everybody get their ballot? Who is attending the convention?
I got mine.
Okay. Anybody? Okay, great. No, so everybody voted, so I should be able to close.
You can check and see if all the ballots have been returned in the settings.
I just voted.
6 people not voted.
They might not be paying attention to the call. There's Susie hasn't really spoken much.
9 emails. The majority of the people, there were 10 voters, 9 emails open. 3, okay.
We need to wait a few more minutes in case somebody still hasn't gotten it.
Well, everybody here is on the call and should have gotten it. Is Carol still on?
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry.
I've been messaging her offline.
Okay, so I am going to close the votes, right? Because basically everybody who is at the convention. Bobby, what, you had your hand up?
Sorry, it was up from previous. I didn't take it down.
Okay, so no objections. I'm going to stop the voting. Okay, so David gets nominated, so I'll just send him a message. And I already sent a message to Rick Ray. If you guys want to, if you guys want to send him a message or anything like that, just let me know and I'll give you his email address. Okay, well, thank you very much. So I'm just gonna close the meeting.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate
you.
everybody being here. Every little bit of participation helps. Don't think it doesn't.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes. Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
See ya.
Stay
Bye,
cool.
bye. Stay cool.
Keep that water glass full.
I don't.
Really.